From the heart of Maine, this is the DuView Podcast.
All right, and welcome back to this week's episode of the DuView Podcast. I am your host, Du, a.k.a. Ryan Dumont, and this week I am joined by not only my friend, but also musician and musical educator, the one and only Mr. Tony Gaboury. Tony, thank you for coming on and joining me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Well, excellent. And, I've known you, I think, my whole life, more or less.
Yeah.
You grew up with my dad. We'll just get that out of the way. No secret there. That's where our relationship, comes from. You and my dad literally grew up together.
We did, yeah.
And I heard he used to be at your house and more than he was even home from time to time.
Pretty much. I think he came one day when he was 5 years old and left when he was about 15 just to check in at home,
And by that time, he went from a wee guy to, a beanstalk, you know.
Right.
That's awesome. That's excellent. Well, again, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time to come over and come on to the podcast. So when I've seen you play numerous times, and you're very well known, in Maine and New England, and in certain communities, definitely across the country, without a doubt. Yeah. And so I know it's been a difficult year for musicians. And just how have things changed, for you? With COVID, hitting us over the last year and a half, more or less.
Yeah, well, obviously there are no gigs, and there haven't been. I did my last gig, it was March 1st of last year, and it was a tribute concert to my friend Steve Grover, who passed away about 5 years ago, July 7th, 2016. And my wife and I took a trip to Florida the next day and came home, and 9 days later, everything was canceled, and I had all these gigs booked with people like George Garzone, as a world-famous saxophone player, and they were gone.
Just like that, literally,
literally,
overnight.
One day they were happening, and the next day everything was, nixed. But I taught at Bowdoin, and I was teaching that semester of the pre-pandemic, and I taught this entire year, but it was all online, and I was, I guess my title was director of ensembles, jazz ensembles, and it was difficult. It was really hard to do that sort of thing online because you need personal.
Right, and it's like you can't, if you have a student, you're like, oh no, hang on, let me show you that lick or this chord or this progression or something, and you kind of can't just grab their guitar, from them and,
Right.
do that type of thing. Or the hand, I know myself struggled with not being able to be hands-on, as hands-on.
Right. And, there's a delay with everything. And with Zoom, it can't, it doesn't like two sounds at once. So if you're talking and trying to explain something, it goes to one thing or the other. So it's been a tough year.
Sure.
For everybody.
Yeah, for everybody, but especially the musicians. I mean, because your home's on the road, so to speak. The venues, they were all closed, right? Yeah. I mean, could think specifically, the State Theater in Portland, Blue, also in Portland. I know you played there quite a bit, and to have you're also in Portland, so to have your little spot across town, convenient, great spot, to just gone. And I hope things are recovering well. Have there been talk about, things starting to recover here a little bit more?
There have been. I do a duo with a woman, a saxophone player, Tracy McMullen, and we had been doing monthly things. So the rumor is that they're going to start up again at Blue, although they were supposed to start in May, but that didn't happen. So I think it will, kind of gradually happen.
It will when the time's right and when
Yeah.
the decision's made, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, like,
Yeah.
they just this week talked about, especially the space mandate in schools, the distance mandate. They got rid of that, or they're
Right.
going to be getting rid of that for next year. So that, I mean, shows that at least you can be sitting shoulder to shoulder with somebody in a jazz club,
Right.
or in a a concert hall or whatever that might be.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. Honestly, exciting for me too. I mean, I play. I've been missing out playing with my friends
Right.
and just
Yeah.
trying to get our little group off the ground there and to play gigs and whatever else. And we were in a lot of the same boat. I mean, given it's not our livelihood, but it's one of those things we do for fun. And that was kind of, we couldn't even practice. I mean,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I know that talking with you a little bit ago, you said the biggest thing you missed was just even getting together with your friends or your
Yep.
coworkers
Yeah.
or and just practicing.
Yeah. Yeah. Music is social. You have to be with people. If you're a painter or something like that, you can be in your studio and that's what you do. But there's an interaction between musicians that you have to be in the same room.
Right. Right, and as we know, the Zoom practice thing doesn't work very well.
It doesn't
It's just
at all.
And you'd think with how long video conferencing technology, and by this time, you think there would be somebody who's like the tech genius and also a musician, and I mean, maybe you have to use like an extra mic or something like that. But it'd be almost great if something like that. Maybe that's the next big idea.
I think it's out there.
Yeah.
And I did read an article about somebody at Stanford University, this professor who developed this thing where it could be done, but it's very complicated. I actually downloaded it and it was like, forget it.
Yeah,
There's
no,
way
it's not
this-
user friendly, and
right, yeah.
and no, that's the biggest thing, right? Is that it needs, especially in education, specifically, music education, it needs to be easily accessible. It shouldn't take like your multi-hour trainings or
Right.
to be have a degree in computer science to use it, or
Right.
you
And
need to
not
know how to
on-
code or
Exactly. And not only do you have to know how to do that, but everybody on the Zoom call has
the
would
students,
have to
right?
know
Yeah,
that.
no, or the other instructors, right?
Yeah.
No, most definitely.
So
Well, yeah, I'm sure. Like I said, it's been a challenging year, and hopefully things get better here sooner than later. But thinking back, way back, I guess, depending on how you want to look at it. But when did you actually first pick up a guitar?
well, I was thinking there was a guitar in the house, and it was just like a piece of furniture. It was like just sitting there, and it was one of those guitars that the strings were so high off the neck that you couldn't possibly play it. But I was interested in it, and I think I probably tried to make some sounds on it. And I was about probably 9 years old or something like that. When I was 10, I told my parents I wanted to learn and take lessons, and I took lessons from a guy who was actually an accordion player
Oh, really?
in Augusta.
Yep.
His name was Leo Pepin, super nice guy. And he taught me how to read and sort of how to play through certain chords. And this is all sort of precipitated by the fact that, I loved the Beatles. The Beatles were on TV, and it's like, wow, I want to do that.
Did you watch the Sullivan Show?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was 10, and I even got a Beatles wig, which was funny because it was pretty short. You always think, oh, the long-haired Beatles. And it was just a normal
The long-haired
haircut.
Beatles really didn't come about until the later part of their career when
Ex-
they had basically almost broken up at that point anyway. Right? The
Exactly, yeah.
68, 69, and
Yeah,
into the
yeah.
early, minimal part of the 70s.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so around 9-10 years old would be the first
I
time.
think so, yeah.
And is there enough, and again, this is me coming from the world as a drummer and a singer, but is there a lot of overlap between accordion? I mean, obviously you're reading sheet music and all that, but like, is there enough of an overlap there between guitar and
Probably
accordion?
not.
No.
It's well, he played guitar too. He
Yeah.
was sort of a typical music educator. If you go to school,
Could play
from-
multiple
right, and you learn
instruments.
trumpet
Right.
and trombone and all the instruments, and so you'll be able to teach people basic stuff.
Right, basic theory, yeah, that's awesome. Was anyone else in your family musical, or did the want to play guitar just kind of manifest out of the blue? Like, I mean, obviously you said the Beatles, there, and some of the pop culture stuff, but any family influences
Yeah,
there?
my brother played trumpet, and then he stopped playing the trumpet and started playing drums. And my mom was playing or singing, I should say, show tunes around the house. So I became familiar with those tunes. I just knew them as regular music that I thought everybody knew.
Right.
You know. Um, yeah, and radio in those days, you listen to AM radio, and they had top 40 shows, and they would play cool stuff as opposed to what they might play now.
Right.
But you'd hear Motown and
Yep.
the Beatles and all those Yardbirds and
Yep.
Jeff Beck and all those people
Oh, yeah.
on AM radio.
Yep.
So yeah, I loved it. I was.
Was it something that just came easily, like picking it up, or did it like take like, wow, this is really gonna like, some people just can grab something and just they start, picking it up very easily, or was it more challenging? Like it did really take some work to get.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think I ever really struggled with it because I just enjoyed it. I didn't think even today I still practice quite a bit, and I don't even call it practicing. I'm just playing. When you go out to play sports or something, you don't say, "Oh, I'm going to go practice." You're playing, and that's, I think, helped. It didn't seem like drudgery to me ever. It was just fun to do.
Right. No different than how, a kid would play a video game or,
Right.
nowadays or whatever. Like that was just your thing, your niche, so to speak,
Yeah.
like guitar.
Yeah.
Yep. That's awesome.
Yep.
I mean, it makes sense, obviously. And so do you remember what obviously not the one that was hanging around the house, but that first guitar that you got, like what was that, if you remember?
I do. I remember it was a Marvel.
Marvel.
And I got an amp with it. It was a Marvel amp too. And I think they both came to about maybe $30 or something like that. But it was an electric guitar, amp, guitar.
Combo. That's
Yeah.
all. Oh, that's
Yeah.
that's neat. That's neat.
And it's funny. I've talked to other friends of mine and say, "Oh yeah, I had a Marvel too." Apparently, they were out there.
It was probably whatever at the store, whatever
Right.
the combo they had. That's wicked neat, and that's funny that there's overlap, amongst other folks of your same age and grew up at the same time.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
really that's really awesome. That's really unique because thinking now growing up when there are so many more options for especially like drums, guitars, really any piece of instrument you want to play these days, you can find it from the top brand, like your Yamahas, your your top of the line type, or your Fender, your
Yep.
Fenders, whatever. But and it's amazing. Like you can get, like talking with my other drummer friends, there's like no overlap, and like maybe you played the same kit for like college or high school band, right? You had that Yamaha Stage Master or something like that, but you never, had the same like personal kit because there's just so many options.
Right.
Somebody prefers Mapex and somebody prefers Pearl or somebody prefers, Yamaha. And I'm sure it's the same way, now with these younger kids playing guitars. Cause like, again, there's like the old classic brands, the recognizable brands.
Yep.
And then there are, some of your newer stuff, and not to, a couple of my friends are much more, I mean, I love the guitar is my favorite instrument to like listen to. I was thinking about that the other day. Like I have a playlist and it has some Hendrix, BB King, and a few other Freddie. What the heck's his name? Not Gibbs, but it's I can't remember his last name off the top of my head. But anyway, you have some of these like like legendary guitar players, and it's just. It's almost like listening to somebody sing for me. You know what I'm saying? The fluctuation and all, your chords and your notes and your soloing and everything like that. And it's just so dynamic, which is so unique. And I'm sure some of those similar things also spoke to you when you were, starting to play.
Yeah. Yeah, after, when I was sort of after the Beatles, and then I started getting into, and that was sort of like more like listening to music. It was a totality. It wasn't like guitar centric necessarily. It was just kind of nice tunes and beautiful singing. And, but when I was probably about 16, I heard Led Zeppelin's first album, and was like, wow, that is like spectacular, you know.
And it still is today.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still quick sidebar. I mean, I still one of my favorite albums of all time is Zeppelin 2.
Oh, Zeppelin 2.
Zeppelin
yeah.
2. It's just for me, song after song after song, start to finish, it just does it for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I could probably tell you why, but I can't tell you why. You know, it's just one of those albums that is just so fantastic from start to finish.
Yeah, the first four were like incredible.
Lights out. Yeah.
And all the Hendrix stuff and Cream with Clapton,
Ginger Baker,
Baker, and those were, you know, I listened to all the time, and some more obscure stuff, Mountain.
I know Mountain.
Leslie West, and I loved all that music. So that was sort of, you know, I got to a point where I could learn all that music by ear, and when I started playing jazz, my brother was a member of this thing called the Downbeat Record Club. So he was listening to jazz, and they'd send a record every month. They had record of the month, and you just get it, and in some wild stuff, Ornette Coleman science fiction, but there was one record that had a guitar player, Kenny Burrell, famous jazz guitar player, still around too. And I was learning all these, you know, Clapton solos and, you know, Jimmy Page. And I figured, well, I'll learn this, you know, too. So I tried, and it was like, wow, what is that guy doing? I had the slightest idea, and I couldn't figure out anything. And I wanted to. And it was sort of an intellectual light bulb. It's like, hey, there's more here that I want to find out about, and I got to figure out how to do it.
Right, because it is. I mean, jazz as itself is just a little bit more complex than your average rock song. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are some, you know, some of your rock operas and rock ballads, and that are just orchestral. You know, some of your Beatles orchestral stuff, and I mean Queen with some of their stuff that they did. But I mean, especially in the form of jazz and the stuff, you know, that I've seen you play or even listen to, the free flowingness of it and the restrained but also unrestrained qualities of it. It's not all. It doesn't have to be all one thing or all another. It's very, very translucent. Very, you know.
Yeah. Well, I was interested in, you know, there's an emotional impact in playing sort of the rock pop music that I played, and that was still part of playing jazz. But there was also a real intellectual part that I liked. I liked sort of melding those two together, so I could, you know, still have the same emotional impact, but I'd be challenged, sort of intellectually challenged, and physically. The instrument it's harder to play, you know, jazz, because you need a little more facility, quite a bit more facility.
And different times, a lot of different time signatures, a lot of your more difficult time signatures to play in too.
You know, and it's a in the moment music. There's not a lot worked out. As you know, when people are soloing, you have a framework, you know, of tunes, and it's 32 bars or however long, and there is a certain set of chord changes or something, but within that, you can do whatever you want. Hopefully it will be good.
Well, that's kind of like the shot in the dark too, especially when you get to a point like where you are, where you can not even practice with the guys and then just, you know, show up. All right, we're playing 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right. And you know, jazz isn't the only music that does that.
Right.
It's funny. Before the pandemic, I went to a bluegrass concert at Blue, and it's the same thing.
Yeah,
they have a repertoire, and they know, and people just, the banjo would just start playing, and everybody would come in.
Yep.
You know, so it's like they have the same language, and that's what, you know, playing jazz. You know, in that situation, you have a repertoire in a certain language, and you just go 1, 2, 3, 4, and everybody takes off. You know, that
overlapping nature. Do you think that between blues and jazz, do you think that comes in part of, you know, their origin, where they come out of, and the communities that they, or, you know, from the groups of folks that they came from?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, obviously the blues came from the South, and and the Delta, and I'm not a music historian. And jazz, basically was in New Orleans, and it moved to Chicago and New
New
York.
York. Yep.
Um, yeah, so it's coming from the same.
It's coming from the same
Same
area. I mean,
place,
it's
yeah.
they're brothers. I guess
Yeah.
they're almost music brothers,
Yep.
and I mean, then those two. I almost think a combination of those forms really kind of translates into obviously your big band era, and then the the eventual rise of rock and roll in the early to late 50s.
Yeah, and I think jazz, what I would consider, maybe modern jazz started in, 1940 or something, bebop. And it just drew from the blues, and then it drew from classical music too. So it was using sort of more dense harmony from classical music and sort of the spiritual nature of blues. And that's what makes it so interesting to me. Most people, a lot of people don't like it quite as much as I do. And there's kind of an old joke: why did you start playing jazz? And the answer is, I don't like crowds.
That's funny. Oh my god. Well, that's and that's interesting. You say that though, and like you say, oh, there's not, but everything that I've ever been to where you're playing or some of the folks that you play with are playing, there are crowds though.
Yes,
it's
some.
it is but it's so, and that kind of segues into one of the things I wanted to talk about. Like, what are your popular locations for jazz? I mean, I know like pre-pandemic, obviously, assuming we didn't shut the world down and that type of stuff. Is it still I'm obviously some of your bigger cities, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously New York, Boston. There's scenes in almost every city has a little scene going on, and these days, amazing players. Washington, Pittsburgh. I know quite a few people in New York and Washington and Pittsburgh, and there's sort of vibrant scenes there, but it's all self-made. It's not like classical music where there's a symphony or something and it's like in place,
embedded in the culture of the community, right?
Most of these scenes are made by the musicians, many of them. So the East Coast is Philadelphia. It's all over.
Yep. Well, that's interesting.
Except South Dakota.
No.
Pretty sure there's not much jazz happening there. Or Montana.
Not much of anything except for wildlife and weather.
Yeah.
But no, that's interesting, and that's then that's what I'm kind of an old soul, and I wish that there were more jazz clubs.
Mm-hmm.
The only real I mean I haven't been to as many clubs in the either in even Maine or New England or even I've never really been to a jazz club in the United States, and the only one I've actually been to was when I was in Cuba. This just goes to show you how cool of a place it is. But at it was like a supermarket store. It was like a bunch of things compacted into one. But up on the roof, they turned it into a jazz club, and this place had been around easily since the 30s. Like you could tell just by sitting, it was wooden, and you could tell like they had the cushions on there at one time. But everything was really unique, and they had people. It wasn't just at this point strictly jazz or the big band. Your with your orchestras. But it was you had some obviously like some island music. Some of that type of stuff. But it was really cool, and you still felt like it had the right, the feeling to it. And they had a couple jazz musicians play, but it was definitely not the type of jazz that we play in the United States. It was very much influences of your like reggaeton, again, your island sounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though, and it's interesting because when you think of, like the history of Cuba, you think of like Castro and repression and like them getting rid of like, the stuff that, made them. But like, that's one of the things that held on was their music, and that's really unique too. But that's, I do wish it had a bigger follow. Just me personally, I do wish it had, that and the big band stuff. I wish had a bigger following because it's quality stuff. I mean, there's just no other way or what else, in my opinion, but it's just, it's getting over, like, again, don't get me wrong, I enjoy, you know, some of the music that is produced on, you know, laptops or in your, you know, your studio settings and sampling. I appreciate all that, but like the live instrumentation of music, I mean, I'm not going to say it's, you know, it's a dying art, but for some you know, in some aspects it also is, right?
Yeah. Well, big band for sure is like not.
No, I mean, like, you have, like, I think the closest thing that's like kind of mainstream is the postmodern jukebox, you know, like, and they don't do strictly like big band stuff. I mean, it's like, you know, transferring, so they do doo-wop and all the other stuff, but like that's like, I mean, but they have like the stands, you know, with the tuxedos, you know, like the in the tradition of it, you know, or Michael Bublé, I guess, like some of your like modern day crooner type folks, I mean, the closest really that you get, I mean, because I mean, a lot of your big band leaders or the folks who sang for the big bands have been dead for 20 plus years. I mean, Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and Dean Martin all died back in the mid 90s.
Yeah. There are some
like small
people who are doing big bands. I have a friend in New York, Frank Colberg, who's actually a teacher, composition teacher at New England Conservatory. He lives in New York, but he has his own big band. And Maria Snyder, have you ever heard of her?
I've heard that name in passing.
She is amazing and writes incredible music and gets all the best players in New York to play. But she also is good at getting money, you know, having people donate, and that's how she survives.
Keeping the thing viable. You're right. Yeah. Viable and entertaining, right? Because it's easy to keep something entertaining. It's hard to keep the lights. It's hard to keep the lights on,
you have to pay people. I mean, it's hard enough to pay like 3 people, and then when you have to pay 20.
Yeah, right.
And just the logistics. I mean, she does European tours. Can you imagine?
God, the travel must be a nightmare.
That's incredible.
You must have to have a part of the plane just for the instruments.
Well,
alone.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah. I know a lot of friends of mine who travel a lot with basses. They either have to just find a bass, you know, when they go to Europe or something, or pay for a seat for their acoustic bass. I don't think many people do that anymore.
No, but that's a unique instrument too. And those guys that play the upright or play the acoustic bass, oh, they love it. You know, and they I love watching the guys who still like swing them around. You know, like in the old '50s shows. You know, that was one of the folks that you played with at Jazz Fest back when you played it. What was that? 2019. He was played acoustic. Bass.
Scott Kiefner.
That's right. That was Scott. That was he played. I believe both years back to back that we did that down. For those that don't know, I'm referring to that we. Myself, I was the president of the St. Anselm College Jazz Band at the time. We brought back, actually, they used to have a jazz festival down there, and we brought that back. We had a few folks from outside of the school, and obviously the band from the school. But we had the combo that my instructor, Chris Claxton, friend of Tony's, and fellow player, bandmate, I guess, from time to time. But anyway, he instructed both our group and the SNHU Jazz Combo, which was across town. And so they came over, and along with, you weren't there the first year that we did. I think you had a prior engagement, but you did come and play the second year. And that was awesome. I mean, it was also kind of a full circle moment for me too, Tony, to be honest with you, because like we had never really played, you know, or shared a stage or played together, you know, up until that point. Even, you know, just doing that was really unique and cool for me and cool for, you know, the other folks there, and it was well attended, you know, you know, as well. And it was just trying to, you know, get publicity back out there, not only for the type of music, because even though, like, and the unique thing about our band at St. A's is that we were not music majors, you know, we were not, you know, like your, you know, music was not our main focus. I mean, you had a couple politics majors, finance majors, a few teachers, you know, we were all really focused and involved in other things, but all came together, you know, once a week for an hour and a handful of gigs to play. And, you know, we're able to put something together that was actually, like, you know, worth listening to. You know, and it was cool to transform the group from, you know, a kind of a, you know, oh, they go into a nursing home, but like by the time I graduated, we were getting paid, you know, to do, you know, private gigs, which was it was such a unique and cool feeling, and that's that's why I love music.
But
when it comes to you, playing, you mentioned that you played with a bunch of different folks, and you mentioned you played obviously with jazz, but talking with my dad before, knowing you were going to come on, he mentioned one of the groups that really stood out, Biggie Rat.
Oh yeah.
And he mentioned being a roadie for that because I believe he had a station wagon or a truck or something like that. Could you go into a little bit of detail or give us a little bit of the backstory on Biggie Rat?
Yeah, Biggie Rat was a group. I think I was 18 years old, and that it had already sort of been together before I started. Let's see. I do remember the most vivid memory is the beginning when I had a job, like the only job I've ever had for one day. And it was at Augusta News, like putting, comics in the paper or something like that.
You were the funny man?
Well, I was inserting a comic section into the paper or some ridiculous job. And so this guy who was part of Biggie Rat came to work the next day and he said, I got a bunch of gigs and we're going to start traveling. And that day I said, I quit, and I was off, and I don't think I've had a job since. Real job.
That's an awesome way to start
That was Larry Smith, who was a singer, and Ed Gagne was the drummer. This is the original Biggie Rat band, Skip Wheeler, and John McCurdy, my great friend, John McCurdy. And so we played in that group for a couple of years or maybe a year and a half, and then that version of Biggie Rat broke up, and then a larger version happened, and that was with Skip and myself and John, but we also added another bass player, so we had Dick Holmes and John McCurdy playing bass. Tino Liakis was the guitar player. Doug Turcotte played guitar. So there were 6 of us, 3 guitars, 2 basses, and drums. And we were quite popular among Augustans. And oddly enough, popular with the local motorcycle gang, too. That was our protection.
That's awesome.
So I even forgot what they were called. But your father will remember.
Yeah, I'll have to ask him about that.
Probably,
he left that part out.
Oh, yeah. So we played a lot of things, locally, but also we did some New England.
I was gonna say he mentioned that you guys were known all around New England.
Oh,
by
yeah.
the end, by the the end of it, and if you still ask people, they'd still say, "Oh yeah, I remember Biggie Rat."
Yeah. And I think the demise was that Doug and I, the other guitar players, started really getting into playing jazz. So we're playing like these Grateful Dead tunes or something, and all of a sudden I start playing jazz on the things. And everybody's like, "What happened to Tony? What's wrong with him?"
Usually you don't go any further. You start playing the Grateful Dead song, and usually you're stuck playing Grateful Dead songs.
Yeah, it was fun though.
Yeah,
yeah. And we did a bunch of concerts with sort of semi-famous bands. Have you ever heard of Commander Cody and the Lost Planet Airmen?
Yes, I have.
We
Hot
played
Rod Lincoln, right?
Yeah. We played a gig with them at the Lewiston Armory, I think it was, and that's when I was in my super jazz phase.
Yeah. I think my dad must have been at that show because he mentioned something about seeing Commander Cody and the Airmen there.
I bet he was there.
And that's funny. We were talking about that too. That's too funny.
Yeah, so that was it was a great experience. I mean, and you make friends, lifelong friends. I mean, I haven't seen most of those people, and John passed away and Doug did too. But I haven't seen Skip or Dick or Tino in a long time. But they're still, like when you see them, it's like
nothing ever changed, right? It's
we're
like
still buddies,
pick right back up where you left off. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I mean, those are definitely the bonds you make with the people that you play. I mean, I can still think of people who I could pick up with
Yep.
tomorrow that I, played with even years ago,
Yeah.
even back in high school, it's just as long as that level of musicianship is maintained through both people. I mean, it's
Yeah. And I think just playing music with somebody just creates this thing, or I don't know if it's trust or just
some type of connection.
some
Can't put your
type
finger on exactly what it is,
some
but
type of
energy.
connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you don't ever lose, so that it's kind of the beauty of it. And I like musicians. They're like my best friends, and they're just fun, fun to be around and interesting. And I think part of it is this thing where you're striving for the same things. You want to make good music, you want good world to live in, and
A lot of shared values,
yeah.
even outside of the outside of the rehearsal space or outside of the concert venue,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
And that's important too, because I mean, who we surround ourselves with, we feed off of that energy, and if we're not around people that give us, the proper energy,
Yeah.
it can affect our quality of content. It can
Oh, yeah.
correct our quality of product,
Yep.
whatever that is, and not just
Yeah.
even outside of music too, but in art, in the other arts and just the workplace, right?
Yep.
That can definitely change things.
Yeah.
Would you say at this point that jazz? I mean, without a doubt, obviously, jazz is your favorite genre to play. Do you even, from time to time, catch yourself just going back and just playing like for the heck of it, like a Clapton song or a little Jerry Garcia this every so once in a while?
I do.
Yep.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I think there's a misconception with jazz musicians that they only listen to jazz. And as a matter of fact, I don't listen to that much jazz anymore. I mean, there's some classical music I really like, but I like sort of pop bands, especially kind of indie sort of top bands that have cool tunes. And like, I love the Japanese House. Have you ever heard of them? It's actually a woman, Amber. I want to say her name is Amber Bain, and she just writes, and it's sort of electronica, but with nice chords and cool tunes. And
I'll definitely have to check that out.
yeah.
I'll check her out rather. That's
so I like that sort of thing. I'm really attracted to it, and I think part of it is because during this, youth time of listening to like Led Zeppelin and all of that, I also really loved James Taylor and Carole King. And so I think these singer-songwriters of today, there's a connection there. It's just nice tunes.
good
Nice,
listening music,
yeah,
right? Yeah, no, most
yeah.
definitely. And I mean, I love James. I mean, my dad's a big James Taylor fan. There was always James Taylor available to listen to as a kid.
Mhm.
And I mean, but I still even listen to it myself, like Slip Sliding. Oh no, that's Paul Simon. Sorry, but sorry, the
I like Paul Simon.
Paul
too,
Simon.
yeah.
But speaking of somebody else, Paul Simon. But Anywhere Like Heaven.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that I have that song. Like, and I've been
Yeah.
listening to that quite a bit recently. It's good. It's between the acoustic guitar and his voice. It's just very easy
Yeah.
on the ears, because don't get me wrong, I'll go headbang in my car and listen to Heartbreaker or something like that. But like, there are those times where you just need to like either decompress. You can't always be listening to that
Right.
that intensity of music all the time. So
Yeah.
I definitely understand when you say that. I'm with you.
Yeah. There's another group I really like that's sort of a jazz group, but have you heard Dirty Loops?
Yeah.
I love Dirty
Dirty
Loops.
Loops.
And they're incredible. They're
Yeah.
great musicians, and the singer is ridiculous. Like, I've never heard anything like it before. And that's sort of like a, incredible musicianship, and they do pop tunes. They do like Justin Bieber tunes.
They covers and
and
stuff
they
like
sort
that.
of
Yeah.
funkify it,
Yep.
and it's incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love when groups do that. There's one of the groups I listen to. You'll probably like them if you check them out. The Electric Peanut Butter Company,
Oh wow.
and they cover Fleetwood Mac's "Dreams," which became
Uh-huh.
popular again. You probably
Yeah.
saw the video of the
Yeah,
guy
yeah,
drinking
yeah.
the cranberry juice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the things to entertain us during lockdown. But anyway, they cover that, but it's definitely more of a funk, almost borderline reggae kind of feel to it. It's not like the stereotypical like classic rock Fleetwood
Mhm.
Mac-esque. It's definitely very different. But because they wrote such prolific good lyrics, and good. It's just well crafted lyrics, and it's meaningful lyrics. It still translates very well.
Absolutely. I like. I'm trying to think of other 1975. I like them, and they're sort of like. I think they produce all of the Japanese house.
Oh, do they?
Albums.
Yep.
So it's real slick.
Yeah.
But really, it's good.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the group Capital Cities? It's two guys,
No.
but actually I showed them to when Chris was our advisor. I showed them because they use a lot of trumpet, like live trumpet, either in their performances, but they use a lot of live instrumentation along with the electronic stuff. So they kind of mash it up. And their radio hit was called "Safe and Sound." It was came out a couple years ago, or a few years ago now. But anyway, they're a great group. They combined a lot of those elements, and they work with a lot of different people. They worked with one of the Andre 3000 from Outkast. That they worked with him. They had a song called Farrah Fawcett Hair. Like they make a lot of older references, and it has like they'll sample like some of your like 1950s, almost like it feels like you're like listening to a 1950s commercial or something like that for a radio bar. Like when you were a kid listening to like the radio, radio ads, like that type of stuff. Yeah. Like it's really time reaching, which is really cool.
Yeah. And if you ask Chris,
yep,
who his favorite band is, I bet he'll say Radiohead.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I can almost guarantee he'll say that.
That's awesome. Yeah. Oh my god! And that just like knowing him, I wouldn't guess that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also wouldn't I didn't know that you listen to a lot of new. I mean I wouldn't not assume, but it's just you ever listen to the Arctic Monkeys at all?
No, I haven't.
You should check them out too. Yeah, you should check them out. I think
because I can ride in my car now, and I just I have Apple Play in my car, and I just say, "Oh Siri, play."
Yeah,
I don't have to touch anything. It's just great.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's excellent. Yeah, I'm just. It's so nice to have other musician folks that appreciate just doesn't matter the year. If it's good, it's good. That's really my policy with anything from when I listen to the Grateful Dead to when I listen to something made today. If it's good, it's good. So that's really unique. But you mentioned earlier on Steve Grover. I mean, I met and knew Steve a little bit, obviously, but I mean, you and he were incredibly close. And just I remember going to a couple of the benefit shows or the remembrance shows. The one at the press room down in Portsmouth that time. I think that was the last. I think that was the last time I saw you play.
Well, that big band we played the next week in Portland. That was my last.
And that was the last gig, and that was awesome. I mean, I brought one of my. You met my friend Jeff too, and he drove us. And on the car ride back, he was just like, "Oh my god." He goes, "Like, how long have you known?" I was like, "I've known these people like more or less my, I mean, not Chris. I mean, I met him in college, but you and Steve I'd known for years. Yeah. And he's such a That's actually the quick story. When I first met Chris, when he first came into my first rehearsal at St. A's, I told him where I was from. I'm from Augusta, Maine. He goes, "You know Steve Grover?" And I was like, "I do know Steve." I looked at him. I gave him the other, sideways glance. "You know Tony Gaboury?" "I know Tony Gaboury." and we hit it off from there. It's just like small world. Like my second week at college, and here's another person, that knows, people from home. But so when did you and Steve, meet? When did you guys start playing together? When did that friendship blossom? And
well, we met in 1977 at he had heard me play. I was playing with this kind of famous trombonist, Roswell Rudd. And Steve came to the gig, and we started talking. He said, "I'm going to do a session in Lewiston on Saturday. Can you come?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And so I went to the session, and we started playing together ever since then. So I don't think I can add that. 77, 20, that's 40 years, right? Yeah. And the bass player was also a cool guy, friend of ours. His name is Everett Adams, who ended up being the bass player for Barry White.
Oh, really?
You know Barry
White? I know Barry White. Yeah.
Yeah, he moved to Los Angeles and
hit it off with Barry White.
Somehow hooked up a gig with Barry White. Yeah, and I haven't heard from him since, but
Mhm.
from probably in the early '80s. But yeah, Steve and I, we just played tons of gigs, and he started a thing called Friends of Jazz, which is a thing where we went into schools and did workshops and concerts at night. And that was me and Ben Street played bass. Brad Terry, a clarinetist, was on it, who's kind of a real well-known clarinetist. And Ben is was the bass player, as I mentioned, who's now for the past 20 years living in New York and playing with everybody: John Scofield, Kurt Rosenwinkel, Billy Hart,
Oh, wow.
all the like famous New York
Anybody who's
guys.
anybody right now. Yeah.
Yeah, so Ben's like a heavyweight bass
Heavyweight.
player,
Wow.
and I just played with him a couple weeks ago. He's actually living in Warren, Maine.
Of all places, right?
Well, he just moved out of the city when the pandemic hit. Although he's got a gig in New York tonight, I noticed, and it's live streamed. This club called Smoke
Smoke.
in New York, and you can buy a ticket, and it's really beautifully done too. But anyway, where was I? Friends Jazz. So we did a bunch of those things, and then Steve started writing. He got all these sort of commissions to do performances at the Maine festival, and so it became an obsession with him, and he just like became really good at it, and wrote tons of music. And I think Chris is on the CD he did. And I'm on the first one, and Chris is on the last one.
Well, I remember my dad on iTunes buying a Steve Grover, Tony Gaboury
Yeah.
track, and I think messaged you or called you and said, "I hope you get and you ended up getting the royalty check from it. It wasn't
Yeah.
like 93 cents or
Yeah,
something.
I think something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Occasionally, some check rolls in for $1.13. Something.
Yeah, the music company streaming services are not too kind to the average musician
No,
by any means. Takes so many streams to actually get anywhere.
Unbelievable amount of streams. Like, yeah.
But anyway, we could talk about
Yeah.
that, but we'll continue with
Yeah.
anyway, Steve. So Friends of Jazz, and then his writing is just, oh God, and just for somebody like me who is not professional by any means as a musician, just amateur and just loves music, it's just to read some of his stuff. And Chris had in a folder with him one time something that Steve had written for something, and it was just, and Chris played it, and it was just so elegant, and it was a trumpet part or whatever it was, and it was just, oh, you know what I'm saying, and it's just, I know you know what I'm saying, but it's unbelievable. It's like cliche poetry in motion. Just you can almost and for me, listening to the stuff he wrote and composed, it's like almost like you can see, like in the cartoons when the music notes are going through the air and you can like see the music. That's how I felt that Steve wrote. And again, that's just my opinion, but that's just the emotion that it made me feel.
Yeah, it's interesting because Steve grew up in Mechanic Falls,
Right.
and his father, laboring family, and it's interesting. At the memorial concert that I put together, the original one, which is about a month after he passed. There's a guy from Bowdoin, a poet who Steve collaborated with in the music, and I remember him speaking and saying, Steve wasn't a regular guy, he pretended to be, and I thought to myself, no, he was just a guy from Mechanic Falls who was like really good at what he did. But there's this feeling like you got to make somebody extraordinary because they do something extraordinary.
Put him up on a pedestal, right?
But if you've ever heard Steve do imitations of Maine humorists, then you would think he's just like a guy. And, we go to baseball games and he says stupid jokes, and but he was dedicated to
Right.
something.
That was his love. I mean,
And we
yeah.
actually shared a house for about 3 or 4 years, and I thought I practiced a lot. And one comment from Steve was, "Yeah, you sound pretty good, and you don't work that hard at it." So I thought I was, but compared to him,
Right.
his idea is like, every day, I'm spending
For
hours
hours,
like
right.
composing, and so, so he had a different sort of expectation of himself. I did what I thought was necessary for me,
or adequate, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, for you, for Tony.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But he was like, yeah, he was definitely on another plane in a lot of ways, but just an ordinary Mainer. Too.
Right. No, and that's so true, because I think back to my dealings with him. It's just like talking. I mean, no different than you and I talking right now. Just average conversation, can talk about a lot of different things, but obviously, if you talk about music and discuss music, he's gonna display his love for music. But yeah, no, that's the awesome thing, and I think that. Yeah, I wasn't at the original concert that you were referring to there, but to hear that, and you're right though. Well, he and we do that with the people that we look up to,
Right,
and and there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, it's good to remember folks as they really are,
as
they should be, like remembered. Obviously, like remember him for the awesome music he created, and the people he mentored. I know there were. Two of I can't remember the names off the top of my head. The two twins, tall blonde
Gideon
gentlemen.
and
They did something at Coney with us, and I had talked with them because they had mentioned that Steve was one. And I was just like, yeah, no, and they said they knew you, and this was before I knew Chris. They know him as well because he asked me if I knew.
They're from Augusta.
Yeah,
too.
They're a little bit older than little bit older than I am, but
I think they're probably early 30s or something like that.
Yeah, no, and it was just it's amazing how many lives you impact, not just as a teacher, but specifically through as a music mentor, right?
Yeah.
Because it really creates no different than a teacher in a classroom, but it really almost creates like a family tree in terms of when it comes to music mentorship. I mean, I know that you as a music educator of how many students, if you just had to guesstimate, that you've taught in your years teaching?
It's got to be 1,000.
Right. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But then that branches out, and then that, some of them will eventually teach, or probably already are teaching. Right. So.
Or will be,
right.
expert musicians.
Right. Exactly. That mentor other people on, or something like that.
Yeah.
So I know you taught at the Berklee School of Music.
I did.
What was that like? Was that pretty intense? And when were you there for?
I was there for 15 years. So I think I started in 95.
Okay.
So whatever, or maybe 96 or something like that. It was great. It was cool because the level of student was really good. And it was kind of a jolt, too. You get in the city. I'd spend 3 days in Boston, and it was just music, and all the time. And some of the faculty became great friends and remain great friends, even though I'm not there. And I got opportunities to travel. We had some weird tour of Budapest and Romania. I think that was right at 2000.
So not long after the fall of the Soviet Union either. So that must have been...
Oh, yeah. It was really interesting. There was a place called Red Square, and I don't know if it was in Buda or Pest. They're separated by the Danube.
Yep.
But, it was like going back in time. And it's interesting because the bass player was British. The drummer was Swedish. The other guitar player was Hungarian. And then there was me. And so I remember going to this little grocery store down the street and with the Swedish cat, Jonas. And,
what a name.
Yeah. And he made sure you pronounced it correctly. It was Jonas, not Jonas. You have to
emphasis on
the second syllable. But, we went into the store and there's like one piece of meat, like a piece of broccoli, It was just what you would remember as being in a Soviet world.
Oh, yeah. No, most definitely.
But that was actually ended up being really fun. It was the bass player worked for BBC, and he was doing a radio thing for BBC about our tour.
Oh, really? That's cool.
And so he's interviewing people on the street. He didn't speak Hungarian, but we had the Hungarian guy sort of translate. But the whole thing started is I had a student, Zsolt Bende, who's a fabulous guitar player. And he said, yeah, I'm going back home, over the break. And I said, well, I'd love to go to Hungary. And he said, you would? And I said, yeah, so I'll set something up. So he set up a tour. And, it was freezing cold, I remember. I had the flu.
Oh, no.
and I didn't have a way to get in touch with him. I just flew to Budapest and hoped that he showed up,
Yeah, right, because cell phones really weren't.
Well, yeah, I didn't have his number.
Or you didn't, yeah, that too, yeah, right.
Touch with him.
Right.
But he said, well, I got a car for our tour. So it was like, I don't know if you've ever heard of an East German car called a Trabant, which is about the size of a small kitchen table.
Yeah.
And it's made out of cardboard.
Oh, yeah.
So we drove around with an acoustic bass in the back and, it's like all over Hungary and Romania. And, but I don't know where I was going with this story. But anyway, yeah, so Berklee.
Yep, Berklee.
So, yeah, I had some really good experiences there.
And I'm sure, like you mentioned, the quality of musicianship that you get through that place, I'm sure is just, it's elite, right? I mean,
it's both.
Right.
I mean, there's elite and hope to be elite. I had one of my first students was a guy from Japan, Motohiko Ichino. And he had won Best Jazz Guitar Player in Japan before he got to Berklee. But he was there, to make contacts and just experience American culture. And he was one of my first students, and I thought, wow, everybody's going to be this good? I'm going to have to really work on this, start practicing. Well, I mean, that wasn't the case,
right.
But,
they all don't fit one register or one type, right? Yeah, no, exactly.
But the interesting thing about it too is the students were great, just as people,
right?
Really nice kids from all over the world. I remember coming into one class. I did the Pat Metheny Jazz Ensemble, or Pat Metheny Ensemble. And there were two guys from Spain, and, I said like two words that I knew in Spanish, Buenos dias. They were thrilled. You're the first one that's spoken to us in our language. I said, well,
that's all you get.
That's all you're going to get. Yeah. But yeah, it was a good experience. And I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore because it was a trip.
Mm-hmm.
I was, at the time, my in-laws were alive and living in Boston. So I had a place to stay in Saugus. And my father-in-law and mother-in-law were both great. They both have passed. My father-in-law was the dean of the New School in New York before he retired. So, I had a connection with him. So it was always kind of a fun thing. But then it became not so much fun because I had to rent a little room.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, but yeah.
That's cool.
That's
awesome.
That's
That's what you want to hear. You hope it's like, it was a terrible experience, and they were pulling my hair out. No, I'm kidding. No, but that's great. No, and so you've taught in numerous places around Maine and New England and all over the place too. You were telling me before University of Maine Orono, Augusta, Southern Maine.
Yep.
We Bates, Bowdoin. Where else you mentioned?
Oh, I had a brief stint at the University of Connecticut.
Connecticut. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
That was a little far. That was the issue with that. That's why it was brief.
Yep.
But most recently in the University of Maine system, it was in Orono.
Yep.
Which was great. The students were fantastic.
They have a lot of good music students and musicians. Sorry, let me try that again. Yeah, up there. I know a couple of my friends. Kid by the name of Brandon Emerson. I don't know if you know him.
Is he a trumpet player?
Yes, he is. Yeah,
he's great.
We played together in high school. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, Brandon. I kind of used to tease him because it would be like 10 below and he'd have shorts
always.
All the
and
time.
you know what he'd do during wintertime? He'd put on wool socks.
Oh, yeah.
That's what he used to do. And he goes, "These are my pants." I used to hold his blocks. He ran track too.
Oh, really?
I used to hold his blocks for track. I'll have to show you this picture. And it's him. He used to be able to jump, as tall as I am.
Oh, really?
The kid was an athlete, great musician as well. And he was a good friend. I mean, I haven't spoken. I need to reach back out with him as you mentioned that. But he was a good friend in high school as well.
I remember we had a fire alarm one day. It was about 15 below outside, and he had he said, "Wow, aren't you cold?" It's like, yeah, Brandon's great, good trumpet player.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was in the group with this kind of like a super group. Alex Batty was a saxophone player in that band. This guy Ben, his name I can't remember his last name, but a really good group. I stopped doing that because it took a long time to drive to Orono from Portland.
Yeah, no, it does. That's a lot of driving for a day.
Yeah, but I do it again. But I got this gig at Bowdoin, which was much more convenient. Although even that, I never actually went to the campus.
Right, because of COVID, right?
Yeah, so, but anyway, yeah, that was fun. And University of Maine at Augusta, I haven't taught there in probably 20 years, but when I was teaching there, I was actually going to school at the same time. So
cool.
I was young,
Yep.
27 or something like that.
Yep.
And USM, I taught for about 6 years in that program. But at one point, it was just USM, UMA, Berklee, and I was driving all over the place,
You sound like my dad.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, geez, that does make it tough. The traveling for work proponent.
Yeah.
Yeah. With especially probably keeping all the students straight and everything like that. That's curriculum and
yeah. It was more work than I actually want to do.
Right. I mean, do you think you get more of your joy from playing gigs or from teaching?
Yeah, I think when you're younger, you're more sort of ego driven,
right?
And that's what's important. And then you teach not because you have to, you like to do it, but it doesn't hold quite the same impact. And now teaching is important. I mean, I feel like I have information
to offer, right?
And and I enjoy giving it. And my wife always says, "Oh, and when we come home from teaching, your like energy level is like skyrocketed." Oh, and I wanted to mention too, I have been teaching at Cape Elizabeth High School for the past 8 years, although I didn't this year, obviously, and that is tremendous.
You like working with the high school group too?
It's fantastic.
Yep.
And I've had some incredible musicians. This kid, Alex Hansen, who's now going to school at the University of Miami, in Florida, the Frost Music School.
I was going to say, that's a great music program down there.
And he's a killer piano player. So that's been a super enjoyable experience. And I hope to continue.
Yeah, most definitely. And as things are opening up more, I know you mentioned you have a gig in September, but hopefully things open up that way more as well here too.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say so far as the favorite venue that you've played? I know you've had a long career and a still continuing career, obviously, but has there just been a favorite venue or a venue that stuck out?
Yeah, there was a place in Portland that was short-lived. It was about 5 years. It was called the Cafe No. And it was started by this guy, Paul Lichtner, who's the sort of jazz impresario in Portland. And he now works with the Portland Conservatory. But that, I think, was from like 1990 to 1995 or 1991 to 95 or something like that. But that was really cool because my friend Ben, who I mentioned before, was making connections with all these people in New York. So I got a chance to play with these people who are now like super famous when they were, 19 years old or something. Great then. And it was just a great space, yeah, it was. I see kind of famous musicians now with T-shirts on that say "Cafe No, Portland, Maine."
That's awesome.
So people remember that place as being like special.
Yep.
So yeah, that's definitely the place.
The people, the atmosphere, just
Yeah.
everything about it just
Yeah.
made it stand out. That's
Yeah.
really cool. I can't think back to one place for me. I mean, given it's been a much shorter lived, but there one place I guess that what I would say stood out was the last paid gig we did for the jazz band. We did it up at Colby Sawyer in their like rec space, and they had it all set up kind of like an old jazz club where you played in the middle of the floor. And so we had people all around us and up in the balcony, and it was just it doesn't happen. That setup just isn't around anymore. That's literally just like the arrangement of the space.
Yeah.
And you could tell it was an old building, but that's what it was intended for.
Yeah.
Because like the bandstand in the middle, and it was just
Perfect.
so cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
That's really a cool way to do it. I watched the video of this guy, Jacob Bro is his name. He's a Dutch, I think he's a Danish guitarist with his trio. And they were set up in the middle and, small audience circling them. And they're all close together. Perfect.
That's
the way
awesome.
to do it.
I think that if anybody's listening that opens a club, do it. Band in the middle, audience on the outside. That's
Yeah, because it kind of like it makes the audience part of the experience
right.
rather than, okay, we're up here and you're over there.
right.
We're good, and you could be if you like us,
Well, if you think even back to like Shakespeare and the Globe Theater, it was audience on all sides.
Yeah.
And that made you literally part of the show, so to speak, part of
Yeah.
the experience.
Yeah, that really is the way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting that just that setup. Like I said, the energy, everything about it's just right.
Mhm.
Everything about it's just right. And so aside from music, what do you like to do in your free time? I know that you're a big baseball fan.
I am a baseball fan.
And former player yourself, and was pretty good player from what I heard from my sources.
Yeah, I was a good baseball player, and it's kind of one of those things that you did all the time.
Well, you and the neighborhood kids, right? My
Yeah.
dad and everybody who was around.
And in those days, you just, got a ball and a bat and a glove, and you go find a field. Or, we went to Capitol Park a lot, and but I played Legion baseball, which is my last experience. But yeah, it's something that I've, it's a lifelong
love.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I wish I could play again, but I think about. I was talking to your father about
Yep.
this. We used to play this game called tennis ball with John Henderson, and it was basically the three of us, and we go to a little league field, and you could throw a tennis ball as hard as you can make it do all kind of curveballs and stuff, and we'd always like complain. This was like we were 20. Like, oh, my arm is killing me. Now I'd have about one throw.
All right.
before
Oh,
that.
we're done. The shoulder's done.
That would be the quickest game on record. But yeah, still still love it.
And I know that talking, with my dad, and even with you before we came on, you were even saying you got a letter from the Philadelphia
I
Phillies.
did, I was like shocked. I can remember the day I was walking up to the mailbox and I got this thing from the Phillies. I thought they were trying to sell me tickets or something. And it said, "Can you come to our tryout camp?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, okay." And I did pretty well. It's interesting because it was against this, there was a pitcher, I think he was for Lawrence, and he was great except against me, and I always
You lit
crushed him. So it just so happens we're at this camp together, and he's pitching to me, and I sort of lit him up again, and he's like furious. Why this guy every time?
That damn Gaboury boy,
So, but he actually ended up going on he was pitched in the World Series for the University of Maine.
Oh, no way.
I remember him pitching against Arizona.
Yep.
So he was good, just not against me for some reason. But yeah. But yep, those were the days.
Those were the days, right? To be young, right?
Yep.
And I know you still love catching a ball game from time to time. What do you think? Thoughts on the Red Sox for this year?
I think the Red Sox, when the season started, I thought they're going to be better than people think they're going to be. If they get halfway decent starting pitching, they got, such a flexible lineup, and they have some good players on that team. I think there was last year was such a downer.
That's an understatement.
For the Red Sox and for everybody. It was kind of fake.
Yeah.
The whole season, the Dodgers, they didn't win the World Series.
I'm glad we agree on that.
I don't buy it,
Not a real season. It's not. It wasn't the 130 odd games. It was 75 or
it was 60 games,
60
not
games,
162.
Yeah,
which
or
is,
that's
a little bit.
That's what we call a sizable difference.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it served a purpose. It took people's minds off, what was going on.
Oh, and we needed it too. I don't know if you were doing this, but it got so bad without sports. My dad was watching the Korean or Japanese baseball league, whatever was open at the time.
The
Korean league.
Yeah.
We started. It was like Go Dinos or whatever.
Right.
That was the team.
Yeah, I know. I was in that same place.
Yeah. Oh, that's a dark place to be as a sports fan.
Yeah. Really.
Nothing against the Korean baseball league by any means, but it's like the time differences with the games were horrendous.
Oh yeah, 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was perfect for him because he'd wake up and drink his cup of coffee in the morning and then go to. Well, he didn't even have to go to work. He'd just wake up and drink his cup of coffee.
Yeah. I've been a musician for so long. 5 o'clock in the morning is kind of when you get home. Sometime. There was a kind of a story about. Remember, there was a famous picture of jazz musicians in New York. It was done in maybe the early 50s or something like that. So this guy had gotten everybody to get there at 10 o'clock to do this photo shoot, this famous photo. So one of the jazz musicians said something like, "I didn't know there were two 10 o'clocks."
Well, yeah. I mean, you live a different lifestyle. You're not. I don't want to call you a nocturnal person, but in part, you almost do kind of become partially nocturnal as a musician, especially if you're on the road quite a bit. Depending on what level you've achieved, too. Either you're sleeping in the back of the car, or sleeping on your instrument or on your pair of shoes, or you're sleeping on top of somebody's foot in a van or something like that.
Yeah,
I'm sure you don't miss those days, do you?
No, I've had some sleeping on the floor with no pillow and like this light blanket or something, and we made $9 or something like that, But,
oh, that's too funny. Well, before we wrap things up today, Tony, where can people find you if they want to see some of your stuff, see you play, or see a gig, or maybe even hire you and some folks? Where can they find you?
Yeah, well, I do have a website, which I haven't updated in quite a while, tonygaboury.com. But you can also look me up on YouTube. I've got tons of videos out there. Just, type in my name, and quite a few with Steve Grover. And, yeah.
I'll be sure to put links to all of Tony's website, YouTube, everything in the description for this, and definitely make sure to check him out because it's definitely not stuff you want to miss. Because it's between the stuff with him, Steve, it's fantastic music for anybody out there. So, well, Tony, thank you so much for coming on. I do appreciate it. We'll have to have you back on again here because I know we could talk for hours and hours more without a doubt. So
Yeah, great.
I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It was fun.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be back at you in a couple weeks here, guys. July 6th will be the release of the next episode. In the meantime, everybody have a great 4th of July. And hope everyone's having a great summer. So be sure to keep up with us on our social media, the DuView Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, at DuView207 for Instagram. So be sure to keep up to date with stuff as we get into summer. There will be more content, more hiking content, especially coming at you. Some more music content here as well, obviously. So with that, guys, have a great summer so far here, and we'll catch you next time.